Good morning, everybody. I apologize for having to cancel class today. My other daughter woke up this morning with a fever and my husband was already on his way to work. So I'm creating this video so that we can continue to make progress and move toward meeting the course objectives. So today is March 14th. And first I want to just review a few due dates with you. Your future plan project is coming up to April 30th. Which is only a month away now, and with spring break, you really want to make sure that you're working on that and making good progress. Certainly, if you have any questions, please let me know, and I would be happy to help you. It's also a good time to start thinking about setting up an advising appointment with me or Christine Jandik. Remember, her email is jandakc, it's JANDAKC @cod.edu, and she can help you as well. You can also drop in to see her. She's there Tuesday through Friday from 10 to 3 in BIC 2H01F. So you can go to see her there too. Your field experience is also coming up due in May, at the beginning of May. So again, we have a little over a month. So you want to make sure that you are working toward, actually it's almost 2 months, toward making progress on that as well. Hopefully you have a placement. If you do not have a placement, please let me know so we can try to find you one and get your hours done. Remember that if you don't complete your field experience, it's an automatic F for the class. And then the last thing coming up due here is I just assigned Chapter 7 Connect, because that has to do with financing, governing and financing schools, which is what we're going to talk about today. So make sure that you have this done by next Thursday. Because of spring break, I'm putting it as Thursday and not the following Tuesday. And then, of course, we have spring break after next week. So what I wanted to do in class was do a quick think and have you talk about, with your PLCs, about how schools are funded and what you know about schools being funded. So you may want to stop this video now and just reflect on that a little bit. What do you think about how schools are funded? So like I said, it would be a good time to pause and think for a minute, and then when you're ready, you can go ahead and start back up again. So we're going to go through, I have some slides here for you that we're going to go through that are going to help you understand where the actual money comes from that schools use. So the first thing you should know is that a lot of people think the government funds schools, but that's absolutely not true. It's actually a lot. In our cases in DuPage County and in Illinois, most of our funding comes from local sources, which is property taxes. So if you live in a more affluent area with higher property taxes, your schools get more funding. If you live in a lower income area with lower property taxes and like smaller houses, lower home values, then you typically get less funding for your schools. So this is part of the reason for there being such a, I don't know if I'd call it an uproar, but such a disconnect between schools and funding, because there's a huge disparity there. Children who live in more affluent areas have better schools, have more resources, have more funds available to them for things that they may need in the classroom and to keep their buildings up to code and, functioning well. Whereas in less affluent areas, lower income areas, they have less money to do that with. So, and what we know from research is that actually our low income students are the ones that need more funding. So, and more money to help them with providing resources and keeping up their buildings and all that stuff. So anyway, so that's local sources. We do get some money from the state. Unfortunately, the state of Illinois is not always real good at paying what they owe schools. So a lot of times now, schools even budget for not getting the funding from the state. So we do get some funding though from them. And then a small percentage comes from federal sources, and this actually continues to decrease as well. So federal sources, we talked about IDEA, IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and through IDEA, schools receive funding for students with special needs, So that would be a piece of this federal sources. So as you can see, and as I was talking about, local sources is really becoming the primary source for funding. So something that I always find interesting here is that in the United States and specifically in Illinois, we always talk about needing more money to make things happen for schools. And if you compare what the United States spends per pupil, you'll see that it's actually significantly less in their secondary as well as their primary education per pupil. So this is just interesting to me because part of the reason, excuse me, part of the reason I wanted to go on this trip to Finland and learn about their school system is because I'm intrigued at how they can make things work with less money per pupil. So something to think about. Schools, when they receive funds, every time you go to the store and you buy something, there you pay a sales tax, and part of that does go to schools. So that's part of the reason they say like to shop local, is because when you spend your money locally, then that money goes back to the local schools. Also personal income tax, so whenever you get a paycheck and you pay your income tax, that would go there. And then other revenue sources like lottery tickets, gambling. There are different proposals out there to get funds for schools, but like the scratch off lottery tickets, all that stuff, or like I said, casinos and that, they all put some funding towards schools. When you look at the spending per pupil here, I think this gives you a good overview as to where the money is spent on who. So you can see that there are some states that definitely spend more, especially here like on the East Coast and Alaska, and then there are some states that spend significantly less here, like in the Southwest. Part of that too has to do with population density, you know. So like in California, there's a huge population of students. Here in Arizona, we have a huge population of immigrant children. So they can be more concentrated in certain areas, especially close to the border here by Mexico. So sometimes it has to do with population. Here in Alaska, it's not as populated, so they can sometimes afford to spend more per pupil. If you look at the whole federal budget, we get this tiny little slice of the pie, and actually Betsy DeVos, from what I am reading online, wants to slice that budget even more, so this 3% could very likely be going down. But federally, you can see that there's a lot of other things that our money goes toward, which is somewhat disturbing. Through the federal government, we have two different types of grants, categorical grants and block grants. So something that always confuses the public with school funding is, our kids need new textbooks, but we got this brand new gym, a brand new like field house or something. Well, it could be that the federal government or some other grant funding has given them a grant specifically to build the field house, not specifically for buying textbooks. So oftentimes there are requirements for how schools spend their grant money, which is important to know. So, but that's the reason that oftentimes there can be that disconnect. Something that I think is worth pointing out is how schools, so like for example, schools can't serve pop anymore. They can't have pop in their vending machines. They can't have pop during school hours and that they allow kids to buy. But like if you think about if you have Gatorade or Powerade in your vending machines, really you're endorsing, well, kids take that as endorsing a product. So in some ways, schools do commercialize their childhood through schools. And then Additionally, if you look at this last point there, schools and teachers can be persuaded to echo the tactics of advertisers. So sometimes we do similar things like to encourage students either to take specific classes or to partake in certain activities or clubs or something like that. So all of that kind of rolls into that. As far as schools and what the future looks like for money, um, something you'll hear about, especially with Betsy DeVos in her position at the Department of Ed, is school vouchers. There's a big school voucher system in Florida. I would highly recommend that you Google that and kind of check that out. Longer school days, maybe even going over the summer. So anyway, I'm running out of time. You can only have 15 minutes on Screencast-O-Matic. So I apologize for going through here quickly, but I can always go back next week and review things. Typically, this is how your school is structured, school system. So here at the very bottom here is principals, teachers, parents, students. So we are kind of the small fish in this big pond. And then you see here at the next level, we have our local superintendents and school boards and kind of all the way up the chain. We'll talk more about why this is important on Tuesday, but I want you to have kind of a visual of how this hierarchy works here with the schools. So I'm actually going to stop there. I have a few more slides here that we'll go over on Tuesday in class, but I do want to just remind you of a few things. Future Plan Project, Field Experience, and Chapter 7 Connect. Chapter 7 Connect is due a week from today, next Thursday. If you have any questions about this lecture, or if you have any questions in general or problems or anything like that, please feel free to email me. I will be available via email all day today. So please feel free to reach out. And then other than that, I will see you all on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.